I'm glad to be with you here today. It's always good to be back in Denton since I grew up here, and it's nice to leave the Midwestern wilds of Wisconsin every once in a while and remember my Texas roots, especially on a beautiful day like today. But I'm especially glad to be here this week because, in case you didn't hear, the world was supposed to have ended on Wednesday. Don't worry, it didn't happen, I don't think. But Joshua Mlakela, a South African man, had a dream back in 2018 that Jesus would return on September 24th, maybe the 25th, depending on your time zone. In our hyper-connected age, though, the fervor gained steam, especially on TikTok. In these anxious days, it's no wonder. It almost feels quaint to remember the last time something like this happened. May 21st, 2011. Some of you may remember it. Billboards and full-page ads went up around the world. And a humble Bible teacher, Harold Camping, who hosted a Christian radio call-in show for 50 years, remember that kind of thing, was preparing people for the end. One of the billboards was up near my old church in Dallas when I was serving there. It seems quaint because he had no political axe to grind. He wasn't getting rich off the thing. He wasn't encouraging people to drastic measures like setting up compounds or starting wars against the Antichrist. There was no Kool-Aid to drink. He had a few Bible verses and a message. Repent and believe. Christ is coming to save you. Those pre-algorithm weeks before May 21st, to look at them now, the excitement seems somewhat measured. More people began coming to his Bible study. More people began calling into his radio show. They had very practical questions. How do I make sure I'm ready? What do I need to do? If my bank account still has money in it on May 21st, is that a sign of unbelief? Should I give it all to the poor? Thinking about the end of things has a way of making your priority list get very small. This is just the scenario in our gospel reading. A rich man lives a life of luxury. I should say lived. He was well-fed and well-dressed. His life was full of friends and fun, feasting sumptuously, clothing himself in finery. And yet it was a life of indifference. There's poor Lazarus every day at the gate. Whether or not Lazarus ever called out to him, the rich man wouldn't have known. Of what purpose is a sad, scabby man for one living in such luxury? The answer comes in their death. Lazarus gets the royal treatment. First-class flight to Abraham's bosom on angel's wings. The rich man, the gospel gives no fanfare at all. It just says, he died and was buried. Down to Hades he goes. Flames, torment. But old habits die hard. His very first impulse is again for comfort. How about a little water just to cool my tongue? We're not so different. Most of the time, we can't endure 30 seconds of silence or boredom before we pull out our phones for a little bit of relief. Forget about torments in Hades. I can't stand in a grocery line without sneaking a little break from the monotony. I get it. A man used to fine dining probably can't stomach a bad trip to Sonic, much less Hades for eternity. But Abraham's words on the other side of the grave should give us pause. Child, he says to him, remember that during your lifetime you received your good things. Now he is comforted and you are in agony. Is this how it works? Does the rich man face eternal judgment just because he had nice stuff? If so, on the grand scale of global prosperity, we're in pretty big trouble. You don't have to have a private jet or own a company that's aiming for Mars to be more like the rich man in this story than like Lazarus. For where most of us sit, this parable should make us a little uneasy. I know it does me. Last week in the gospel reading, which comes right before this in Luke's gospel, Jesus says this, speaks about this dishonesty of wealth. He says, make friends by means of dishonest wealth. He calls it dishonest. How is it dishonest? It lies to us on both ends. On the one hand, it tells us that we don't have enough. We just need a little bit more and then we'll be secure. But it's lying. It's never enough. And on the other hand, when we have it, it tells us that we have it because we're so great. We were smarter. We worked harder than the average Joe. I deserve it. And from that standpoint, anyone that doesn't have it can't possibly be as good as we are. This is the sin of the rich man. It isn't the finery itself, but what it does to him. It focuses his attention on his own needs so much that he can't see the needs around him. Listen to what he says again. Father Abraham, have mercy on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue. First thing on his mind is his tongue, how it's doing. The man who was too caught up in feasting to see Lazarus in his needs is now too caught up in torment to see him as nothing more than the afterlife's version of the help. I have a wife and 3 lovely girls, 11, 8, and 2. And much of my life, like every parent, is tied up with their needs. Rides here, games over there, still a few diapers, bedtimes. It's a full home life. And like many of you, my work life is equally full. But I've noticed that once I'm home, as glad as I am to be there and not at my office, when one kid starts picking on another one, or a toddler gets into something and spills it, or there's math homework that I don't really know how to help with, I feel the temptation to pull out my phone, check my email, go back to work in my mind for just a second, or check my social medium of choice just to see if something better might be out there. What I find is, no matter what it is, when the noise from outside jolts me back into the real world, I feel agitated. Do you ever do this? Like, what I'm doing was so important that I can't be bothered again. I only see my needs, not the ones around me. You received your good things, but now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. The chasm in the rich man's heart between him and Lazarus on earth has become real, permanent, concrete in the hereafter, and impossible to cross. Who do we need to see in our lives? This man, when the comfort doesn't come, he pivots, change strategies. Then, Father, I beg you to send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, that he may warn them, so that they will also not come into this place of torment. His mind goes to legacy. Philosopher Samuel Scheffler proposed a thought experiment about what it means to live a life that has purpose and meaning. He asks this: if you knew that you would die comfortably at a ripe old age, but the entire world would be destroyed a month later by an asteroid, how would this affect you? It's worth thinking about. For most people, this thought is much more disturbing than thinking about our own death. If you're an author, why keep writing? No one's going to read your book. If you're an engineer or a carpenter, why build anything? Why invent? In some ways, the survival of other people after us matters more to us than our own survival, deep down. P.D. James wrote a novel that was turned into a film in 2006 called Children of Men. And it depicts a dark future about 25 years from today in which no babies have been born for 20 years. No crying babies, no baby showers, no children playing on jungle gyms. The scene is bleak. All hope has drained from the world. It's a shift of the scenario proposed just a moment ago. Nobody's dying early, but nothing lives on. The story begins right as the world's youngest person has just passed away. Another reminder for the characters in the world of the despair of life without hope in the future. Wealth, status, power, these are all pretty meaningless things in a world like that, where there are nothing to pass that wealth onto, pass that world onto. And everything in the story changes when they find a woman with a suspicious swelling in her midsection. Could she be with child? If this is real, if this woman really is pregnant, then not all hope is gone. The story plays out. I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's been out for like 20 years. That's on you. But the worth of one child in this story becomes a fight for the hope that that child represents. What makes a life matter? What makes it count? How does the way we live and who we live for make a difference for how we get meaning in our own lives? How do we measure the worth of our lives in the scale of eternity? How do we measure the worth of any one life in this world? We believe in a God who so loved the world, he gave. He gave his son. He gave his life. As St. Paul put it in our reading from 1 Timothy, we believe in a God, quote, who gives life to all things. The God who gives us Christ Jesus, who in his testimony before Pontius Pilate made the good confession, giving up his life. This gift wasn't something he reserved for his tribe or the disciples, like the rich man in the story thinking about only his brothers. It wasn't even just for Israel. He presented himself to his accusers, ones who thought he was their enemy. He placed himself in the hands of Pontius Pilate, the representative of the power of Rome that in a few years' time would destroy his father's temple and try to wipe out his kindred completely. He didn't measure or limit his gift to any one tribe or just his brothers. He gave for all. We're in the middle of a shift in our era. I think many people feel it. The baby boomers of the Western world are passing into their great reward, retirement, and on the way to Abraham's bosom, as we all are. But something more than just generational change is taking place. Old orders, old settlements, old institutions, old peace. Will they be here in 5 or 10 or 20 years? The fact that we can't confidently answer that makes us anxious. It creates anxiety, and we as a culture have it in spades these days. News algorithms feed us what will keep us scrolling, but it's hard to find the truth sometimes. And when truth is hard to find, fear rises in its place. What we do is we carve our tribal lines just a little bit deeper. In a world up for grabs, it's hard not to just look to your own tribe and care for them. The needs of the world are too big, too difficult. How do you even know where your compassion should go? I get it. Can't fix all the problems in the world. Let's just take care of ourselves. Yet in a moment like this, where sticking to our tribes is easiest, our great test is how we care, not just for our own, but all those God puts into our lives. There's no one in Israel or in Gaza that isn't created in God's image and worthy of his love. There's no immigrant and no ICE agent that is beneath the dignity of love, because Jesus Christ became a true human for all of us, for all our salvation. In a world polarizing, drawing lines, we shouldn't wait for a miracle, as Jesus says in the story, someone rising from the dead to shake us up and say, okay, now I need to get it together. It already happened. Jesus Christ died, rose again. Question put to us, the hearer, is, will we hear the word of Moses and the prophets? Will we grieve, as the prophet Amos said in our first reading, over the ruin of Joseph? Will we put down our phones, put down our feasts, put down ourselves long enough simply to see those in our world whom we might rather not touch, whose opinions we'd rather not hear? Can we see Christ even in them? Angola in Louisiana is the largest maximum security prison in America. It has more inmates serving life sentences than anywhere else in the country. Over 85% of the men in Angola today will die there, mostly of old age and natural causes. These violent offenders, these murderers, wasted their life outside, caused havoc in the world around them, and they're left there to die alone in a prison infirmary. That is, until 1997, when the warden began a hospice program in this prison that was staffed from the general population of the prison itself. These convicts, some of them murderers themselves, bathe and dress fellow convicts, their patients. They're changing their sheets, keeping vigil with them in their final moments. It may sound like an exploitation of prison labor, but the reality is actually quite the opposite. I saw an interview of one murderer turned caregiver named Boston. He told a story about an angry, nasty inmate he got, hostile in his final months, happens sometimes, guilty of a crime for which he showed no remorse to the very end. In the process of serving this man in his dying days, Boston said, "I have never done anything for anyone but myself. But loving someone who can't love you back is changing me. I feel human again." It's a murderer saying this. Hospice is supposed to be about letting someone die with dignity, but for me, it's about living with love. Now I know what life really is. As St. Paul said, "Be rich in good works, generous and ready to share, storing up for yourselves the treasure of a good foundation for the future, to take hold of the life that really is life."